who are joining us virtually. Dr. John Jones is here to interview. He is one of our finalists with the Dean for Education and Behavioral Sciences. And Dr. Jones, I did let him know that there would be probably a significant number of people watching us virtually because of this time in our semester, and he understands he's part of higher ed, so he knows what that's like. So I'm going to start this off like I have with other candidates, which is I'm going to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself, your experience that would relate to being a dean at Nicholls State University, and then also why in particular do you feel like you are a good fit for us?
The question of fit is always a difficult one because I'm still learning the institution. It's hard for me to say, yeah, I plug right in a particular way. The short version about me, and I will try to keep this short because as I've warned the deans, I am my own favorite subject. So if I go a little bit too far, don't hesitate to cut me off. And as a teacher, I was a special ed teacher for a while, and any teacher needs to be aware of their own bad habits. One of mine is when I get really excited, I start talking kind of fast. So if I need to slow down, please don't hesitate to say something and urge me to slow down. And those of you online as well, don't hesitate to throw something in the chat, and I will try to moderate myself. The short version about me, I have been a special education teacher. I was primarily in East Texas for several years, and then my wife and I, we moved with our only daughter to South Carolina. I was an adjunct. I was a high school teacher there for a bit in Charleston, South Carolina. I was an adjunct there as well, and being an adjunct is not an easy thing to be. So if there are any contingent faculty, I've been where you are. And our second daughter was born there. We then moved to Missouri. I was offered a full-time tenure-track position at Truman State University in Kirksville, Missouri, which is in a town of about 18,000 people. And it's literally 100 miles from anywhere. The nearest town of over 100,000 people was about 100 miles away. It's 200 miles from St. Louis, 200 miles from Kansas City. And so here, where we are less than an hour from two major metropolitan areas, I feel like I'm in the middle of a huge city right now as it is. We have that right here. I'm used to small towns. But I started out my life in Boston. I lived there until I was 14. And I've already made this joke once, so I apologize if you're hearing it again, but if you've ever seen Good Will Hunting, I used to talk like that. That was my native accent as a kid. And then when we moved to Japan, and my mother is from Japan. My folks, we moved over there in 1991. And mom and dad are still there, and we go back and visit when we can. But I attended a high school in the Tokyo area. And so I've got a wide range of experiences both here and in Asia. It's been a very interesting run. And so I take a fairly international approach to things when it comes to the work that I do. And I like talking about different cultures and where different people are from and hearing their stories, because everyone always has a story to tell, and I love hearing those. And that was one of the big draws for me as a teacher. I've spent my entire higher education career in regional publics. College of Charleston, Truman State, I was at Peru State in Nebraska. And the real action in my mind happens at the regionals. You look at places like, I don't know, LSU or UT Austin, places that are huge R1 campuses, and they get a lot of attention more because of sports than anything else. But they're the ones that are often in the public eye. It's the regionals where we are able to focus on the students. It's a smaller campus, it's a smaller community, you get to know your students as a faculty member, the students get to know their faculty on a first-name basis. One of the things that I love telling prospective parents at all the places that I've worked is, if you miss class in the morning and your professor happens by you in the afternoon, they will stop and say, hey, we missed you today. How's that going? Being able to build those relationships to me is really one of the great draws of a regional public. And so the chance to continue that work is what's drawing me here to Nicholls. And the work that we do at places like this is so important. And I want to do everything that I can to promote the work that the faculty are doing, promote the work that the students are doing, because what we do really is forming the bedrock of the American middle class. And that is so much of what is important about the work that happens at places like Nicholls. My personal reason for applying here, I mentioned that I was working in East Texas. My wife's family is throughout East Texas and a little bit into northwestern Louisiana. And so she is an only child. We've got 2 kids, and so they are the only grandchildren that my in-laws have. So the chance to get back a little closer to them, we're about 6 hours from them from the spot right here. That was my personal reason for looking for something in this area. Just a chance to come back here, raise my children closer to their grandparents, closer to family. I mentioned my parents live in Japan. It doesn't matter where in the United States I work. I'm going to be very far away from them anyway. So my draw is I want to get my kids near one group of grandparents as best I can. So that's my personal reason for being here. But as far as a good fit, one of the things that I've noticed, and I've had the chance to be on a variety of different campuses over the years, just walking around here, everyone says hello, which I am not used to. In Nebraska, we're friendly, but we wave as we walk by. We don't speak. Here we engage. I love that. So there's a clear sense of community here that, and maybe if you've been here forever, you just take it for granted, this is how it is. This is not how it is at most other places. There's a level of community and a friendliness here that just walking around, even on a fairly empty campus that I'm picking up on. And the more that I see it, the more I think, I like this place. I like it a lot. So now, whether you like me, that's for you to decide over the course of the next 45 minutes. But if you have any questions at all, please tell me. Marilyn's going to be the one fielding those. She warned me not to prepare a presentation, so I prepared literally nothing. This is like Prime Minister's questions in the House of Parliament in England. Just hit me with whatever is on your mind. I will do my best to answer them, and I will open the floor.
Do I have any questions from the floor?
I don't think I'll need a microphone. We've been through quite a bit of upheaval in the education department with deans, interim deans, who've come and gone over the last 5 years, and I just wondered what your plans were long term. Are you looking to move again anytime soon? I mean,
In case you didn't hear, I'm being asked, am I planning on moving again at some point? So my wife grew up as an Army kid, and she moved every couple of years. I've moved enough in my life that I hate it. She hates it even more than I do. So no, I want to find a place and then stay there. And that's my goal. And if I am willing to go someplace else, if for whatever reason an institution's fit doesn't match with my values, my priorities, with who I am, it's partly why I'm looking afield now. But no, once I find a place, I want to stay. And I was 11 years at Truman State in Missouri. I was, the opportunity at Peru State College came up, and it was too good to turn down. But no, I don't want to go anywhere. And I'll put that on the record. If I find a place, if this works for me, you're going to be stuck with me for a very long time if this works out.
Question, anyone else?
You just mentioned the fit with your values. Would you talk a little bit about what those values are?
Sure. That is a very broad question. What are my values? Professionally, it's keeping the door open as much as we can to anybody who wants to learn. And when I think of the work that regional publics do, no matter where in the country we are, the message should always be the same to students, and that message should be, you belong here. This is your home. This is where you need to be. We want you to be here. And so I'm looking to find a place that mirrors that, not only pays lip service to it, but practices it in a profound way. And so when I think of things that matter to me as an educator, it's, are we doing the best by our students? Are we helping them to get to where they want to be professionally? Are we helping them to get a better sense of who they are as people, not just as professionals? Just who we are sort of informs how we do the work that we do. And so when I look at a place like Nichols, when I look at any institution that is student-centered, that is focused on teaching, I look at what is it that we're doing for our students that helps them to achieve whatever it is they want to achieve. And I don't remember if I mentioned this during my first round interview. It happened to be on that. But my philosophy has always been, and I try to put this in writing as well, what we do at Nichols, what we do at any place where we are serving students in a really meaningful way is we tell them, you come here with a high school diploma, and you come here with a work ethic. And that's all we ask of you. Just bring those two things. The diploma's going to get you in the door. The work ethic's going to get you back out again, and we will meet you halfway in between. And so when I talk about the values that I have as a professional, it's what are we doing to help our students take the work that they're doing and achieve those ends. Now I realize that was an extremely broad answer, and I could spend the rest of our day talking about what's important to me. But the long and short of it is this a welcoming place for everybody who wants to be here? Is this a place where we can look every student in the eye and say, you've got something you want to do, we will do everything we can to help you get there. And for me, that's part and parcel of the work that we do.
Other questions?
So in teacher education, Louisiana is a state that has a lot of education policy that is constantly evolving. It's kind of like a moving target. So I was wondering if you could speak to your experience in terms of educational policy and making sure that it is implemented.
So speaking of my experience in education policy and so on. So my doctorate's in education policy. And right after I got my master's degree, I worked a year with a research group at the George Washington University. And so we had some experience interacting with Congress. And yeah, it's an evolving process. It never ends. The changes are constant. And one of the great ironies of teaching, really, is that a lot of policymakers and a lot of parents and a lot of taxpayers, they say we want core values taught. We want either the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic. We want certain things taught constantly year after year. But at the same time, we also want to keep making changes to things. And there's a constant tension there. And so I do what I can to keep up with legislative proposals that affect education. The thing is, with legislatures, whether it's Congress, whether it's any state legislature, 9 times out of 10, any proposed bill dies in committee. It doesn't go anywhere. And so it might seem like, on the one hand, why are you wasting your time keeping up with stuff that's not going to go anyplace? You keep up with it because that tells you what the trend is and what politicians are thinking, what legislators are thinking, what policymakers are thinking. And it's important to be aware of those trends. And we've seen a bunch of bills that are proposing tweaking, say, how reading is taught. We've seen a bunch of bills proposing how special education might be modified. Even if those bills don't necessarily become law, it tells you very clearly what different political groups are thinking and what influence they might have in actually making some of those changes come to life. And so that's the first step that I would take, is I just try to keep up with what's happening in the legislature. And I freely admit it's very hard to do, and legislative proposals are often written in very dense language, often deliberately, I think, dense language. And I apologize if I sound cynical when I say that, but it seems to be the case that you'll couch things in bureaucratic or legislative language, when in plain English, it's saying, you just want to change this thing. You can sum it up in one sentence. So keeping up with that really, I think, is the first step of any administrator, whether it's a dean in a college of education, whether it's a school superintendent or principal, just knowing what's coming down the road. The other thing that, as much as my schedule permits, I would try to do is visit school boards and go to school board meetings and talk to the policymakers at that level, talk to the administrators, and get a sense of what's happening locally. Education is one of those things where we have a federal Department of Education for now, see how that goes. But there's no Ministry of Education in the way that you get in most other countries. It's not nationally directed, it's state level, it's local. And so, because so much of it is local, learning the culture of a place is really important. So that's the other thing that I would try to do, is get a sense of what are the values of this community. I'll give you an example. When I was a school teacher in East Texas, and I don't know how it is in Louisiana, I have not looked this up, but the town that I taught in East Texas, still permitted corporal punishments in the schools. Is that something that's at all the case here? You're all shaking your heads and those words. Okay. Yeah. So I grew up in a household as a kid where my parents never raised a hand to me. We don't do that to our kids. But it was the community value that it was perfectly okay. But the principal literally had a wooden paddle hanging over his desk. It was his instrument of discipline. And I thought, what am I getting myself into here? But this was what the community wanted. And so understanding then how changes to understanding how proposed changes to disciplinary policy might be received is something that you have to be aware of the culture of a place in. And so little things like that, to my mind, really encompass not just what could happen, but also just what people want to have happen, even if there's not necessarily a basis in reality for making that. So the long and short of it is, yeah, you look at what's coming down the pipe from legislators, but also what do people in the area want? What do the communities want? What are their values? And if I do get this position, I know I have my work cut out for me. I have to get a sense of what's happening here in Louisiana. despite the relative closeness, Texas is not Louisiana and vice versa. There's a very clear distinction between the two. And so I have to learn how to live and breathe what's happening here. But I hope I answered your question. It really does come down to a variety of different things. And I don't know that there's any one thing that I would do. It's just a whole bunch of little things. It's constant because the evolution, as you pointed out, is constant as well.
Questions? If not, I have one. So as a dean myself, I would like to know your perspective on what are some of the main characteristics or skills that a person needs to be successful in a leadership role like a dean, especially in this situation, you've got education and behavioral sciences. So what do you think are the most important characteristics?
First thing that comes to mind is, I'm going to repeat that for the
That's
Zoom
good
audience.
idea. Yeah.
So I'm being asked, what are some of the characteristics of a successful dean? And the first thing that pops into my head is a willingness to be wrong. You have to be willing to be wrong about things, because I have worked with a couple of administrators who just weren't, who were never wrong about anything, ever. Challenging to work with, to say the least. And to my mind, you can't have that attitude. You have to be willing to learn. And my philosophy has always been, the faculty are the experts. If there's something that needs to happen, I'm going to go to them and ask, what are your thoughts on this? What do you think? So being willing to listen and being willing to be corrected is a crucial aspect, I think, for any leader in any organization, but especially in a place where we have so much expertise in a small space. Being willing to listen and being willing to be corrected. The joke that I make is that I always assume that I'm the dumbest guy in any room that I step into, which has been proven right more often than I'm comfortable admitting. But it comes down to, I don't know. And being willing to say, I don't know everything, what do you think is going to work? My field of scholarship is the history of education. And as a history guy, I'm big on context. I want to know what's happened before, what has worked before, who has done what, what's been successful, what's not been successful. I need the context, I think, to be effective at my job. And I think any leader should be aware of the context of the place that they're stepping into. I will add also, if you are hoping to hire someone who's going to parachute in and start barking orders and making changes on the first day, I am not your guy. That is not my style. I'm not going to come in and assume that I know everything that needs to happen and all the changes that need to be made. I need to take a little bit of time to get a sense of who's who, what's what. And so being willing to listen, being willing to make changes in a way that reflects the values of the place, and I keep using that word, I know, the values of the place, but that's very important to me, is finding a place that has a clear sense of itself, of where it's been, where it's going. And so understanding all of that is really critical. I also think too of alumni relations and working with prospective donors. Just over the past 20 years, the position of dean has changed so much. It used to be mostly just academic focused. Maybe the president did some fundraising, but it was mostly the development office. Now, deans are very actively involved in building relationships within communities and cultivating funding and working in ways that were not necessarily happening in the 20th century, but also then being willing to tell the story about a place, learning the story of the institution, embodying that story, being able to talk about the good work that we're doing and why that's important. So all of that to me comes together, and this is on top of what I just take for granted as your basic managerial competence, your basic budgetary competence, learning how to manage all of those resources. And the one thing where I wish I had more, and I maybe wish is maybe too strong a word, because it would imply that I've had a lot of experience with this sort of thing. But working with personnel who are having conflicts, I have been really lucky. I've worked in places where there were very few conflicts between people, and I haven't really had to mediate anything. So I will add also then that if you're looking for someone who's got a lot of mediation experience, you might want to look someplace else. I've been very fortunate in terms of having a lot of really good people to work with. And I find that if you set the tone of listening and engaging and hearing the other person out, then that carries forward not just to the faculty, but to the students too. And they'll hear each other out and they'll work together. And you won't see much in the way of conflict, of challenges getting to the point where no one's talking to each other or where there's a lot of toxicity in a place. But it really does come back down to listening. And the irony, I realize, is I'm doing all the talking here. I do listen, I promise, I do listen. And coming at it as someone in special ed, it takes a lot of patience to be a special ed teacher. I find that I'm tapping into that a lot too as an administrator. And I have, maybe it's because I'm Japanese on my mother's side, but I can just sit there and listen. And I'm perfectly comfortable in silence. I'm perfectly comfortable listening to someone talk about something about that's of great passion to them and hearing them out and getting a sense of who they are, because I love getting to know people at that level. I have a lot of times I'll just walk around the common areas and stick my heads into people's doors. I have to be aware of the fact that I'm quote unquote the boss, and I don't want to make it seem like I'm spying on you all the time, but I do like to just walk around and talk and get to know people, because I'm not the expert on everything. I want to know what you're doing. I want to learn from you. I want to learn about the work that you're doing from the students that you've got. It's very important to me that I'm able to build those relationships with. So, and again, I could talk for several more minutes about this, but I'll stop myself there. There are a lot of moving parts, all of which I find are really interesting in their own way. So, all of which is to say, I do kind of like being a dean. I like getting to know people at that level. So, I appreciate you asking me a question. Thank you. I can't tell if we have questions in the chat. I'm sorry.
And it doesn't look like it right now.
Okay.
So I'm going to go down my list. We did talk about this, excuse me, a little with the deans, but here at Nichols we have a really strong enrollment focus and recruiting. So give us some of your ideas about how you would approach recruiting students for both education and behavioral sciences.
Both of those fields have the relatively unusual advantage of, if you're older, you tend to be taken more seriously. If you're younger, maybe not so much. And so one of the things that I've seen work at a couple of other institutions is pulling people in from other careers, people who want to make a career change, people who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, who have had work experience, who have lived a life, who've done some things. And one of the things that I found really powerful when I was working as an education professor, some of my best students were the non-traditional students. They've had careers, they've been out in the workforce. And so a couple of times when I was observing a lesson, a student would throw a hand in the air and say, "Hey, Mr. Smith, when are we ever going to use this?" Mr. Smith has the life experience to say, actually, you're going to use this here, and I've done it in these circumstances. And so being able to bring in that experience into a classroom is of such tremendous value. And I think also for counseling, having some life experience to back up some of the therapeutic work that you're doing is critical. If you can have the ability to look your client or your patient in the eye and say, you know what, I've been there, I can see the challenges that you're facing. These are some things that you might want to consider. Talk to me a little bit more about that because I can relate. I've been there. And so working with non-traditional students, I would love to see more of them stepping into an education or into a counseling role. I would also, and I use the phrase, I'm going to risk shooting myself in the foot. I said this with the deans, and I'll say it here. I'm willing to bet, and if anyone can correct me, I'm thinking especially of the faculty in the chat now, I'm willing to bet that there are more former teachers working other jobs than there are teachers actually working as teachers right now. I don't have any hard numbers for this. I've gone looking. I can't promise that I'm right about this, but this is my feeling. Given the rate of turnover within the teaching profession, there are former teachers all over the place. And if we are able to look at teacher education as something that can prepare you not just for a teaching career, but also has transferable skills into other areas, I think we might be able to draw more students into it, because teaching, and to a lesser extent counseling as well, we have a sense of this is what you go into, this is this one narrow focus, this is what we're preparing you for, period, end of sentence. Well, no, we have so many other skills that we're teaching. If you're in teacher education, for example, we're teaching things like project management, we're teaching things like managing personnel, we're teaching things like organization of materials and getting things together. All of these are transferable skills into a variety of other professions. But if you start talking to people who've been teachers for a long time, and for whom teaching is the thing that they've always wanted to do, they don't care for that very much. And I understand completely where they're coming from. But the reality is that in teacher ed right now, we're seeing a huge shortage of candidates. School districts are seeing huge shortages of potential teachers. And I think if we can just get more people into the classroom, even as students, even for their first initial few hours of contact in the classroom, if they're coming into it with, yeah, I'm going to maybe pick up some skills that I can use to work in sales or whatever else, we get them in there. we might end up getting them to fall in love with it. All we need to do is get more people into it, and I think if we start with that, it's not the end of it, that's the beginning, but if we start with that, we can start to see more people from a variety of backgrounds going into education. So we've got older folks, we have people who are non-traditional students, we also have maybe people who are contemplating it but aren't able to sell themselves on it. Maybe they have friends or roommates who are completely devoted to teaching or completely devoted to counseling, and they think, oh Lord, I have to maintain this level of passion and devotion to be good at it. No, not that level. As long as it's something from which you derive some satisfaction, and as long as you are professionally competent and you care about the work that you do, it does not have to be your entire life. But that message resonates in some places more than others. But this is something that I think could work to bring in a little bit more enrollment. Just getting the word out that we are teaching not just how to teach, but also a lot of other stuff that's transferable elsewhere. Like I said, the challenge is going to be working with some of the folks who are of the attitude of, well, no, this is a calling, this is what we have to do. And it's going to take time. I can't imagine it's going to be an easy road. But the reality is, we need teachers, we need counselors, and we need them as soon as we can get them. And the way to do that is to attract the biggest possible pool. The way to attract the biggest possible pool is to cast the widest possible net with as many points of contact that we can. But and there are so many other challenges that we face in enrollment, but that's the beginning of it. One of the other things I think of, and I promise I'll stop rambling after this, one of the other things that I think of is when we are looking at counseling as a profession, or looking at behavioral sciences as a profession, or looking at education, a lot of it is driven by local and regional needs. So what works in point A might not necessarily work at point B, and what the needs are going to vary. And so finding out in a very clear and real way, using all the data we can get our hands on, to figure out what the needs are locally, regionally, statewide, then we can start to pitch the message a little bit differently. The certification exams are the same statewide. The certification exams, I'm thinking for counseling, they're national in some cases. That's going to be the same. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what specific needs does the community have? What is it that we can do then to meet those needs and to have those conversations? And you've probably gotten the sense I'm happy to talk your ear off about any of this. This is how I engage with external stakeholders as well. This is how I engage with people who are working in those professions when I ask, what do we need to do for you? What is it that we can do to give you the right people to slot into the openings that you have? What can we do to meet your needs? Because it's not any one thing. It's a whole constellation of things that have to come together. And the real challenge then is building relationships and making sure that the external stakeholders that we have are being heard, but also that we're meeting the needs of our students. But again, there's some tension back and forth. You can tell I'm getting a little bit up about this. It's something that I'm really passionate about. But if we're able to start with those things, I think then over time, and that's the catch, isn't it? Over time, we can start to ease the shortage. I don't think there's going to be any one miraculous turnaround that's going to flip things around in the next 2 years. I don't think that occurs anywhere in the United States. But that would be the beginning of that conversation.
That's for any thoughts or questions, or would you like me to keep going on the list? All right. So, there you go.
So you've had some administrative experience. Can you talk a little bit about programs that you've built? And that's question one. But secondly, in your research about Nichols, what are some programs within the College of Education and Behavioral Sciences that excite you about development?
I'll answer your second question first. I'm a special ed guy, so the Bridges thing is phenomenal. I got a chance to tour that earlier this morning. And I have not had the chance to work with anything like that in any institution I've been in. And the fact that that level of support is available for students here speaks volumes, I think, to the passion that people here have for working with students who have specific needs. And just to be part of that really revs me up. I love seeing that very much. And so if we could, I want to keep that going. I'd love to see that grow to meet needs of folks who are, I know most of the students there are from the area, but I'm blanking on her name, and I'm sorry, the director who we met this morning. She was talking about how she was at a conference in Pittsburgh for Bridges programs at other institutions. And through that, she's met one person from London and another from Saudi Arabia who's considering coming here, just based on the fact that the program exists at this place. So I think that's a fantastic draw. Could you ask me your first question again? I'm sorry.
Talking about a program that you've built.
Yes. Okay, so a program that I built. So I've been involved in a couple of things at two different places. At Peru State, we're putting an online entirely online elementary education bachelor's degree together. We had an MAT, a Master of Arts in Teaching, for people who are degree holders in other fields who then want to go back and get certified to become teachers. We had just gotten permission from the Nebraska State System to put that online. We're starting to make that happen. At Trine State, I was part of the team that a few years ago was putting our online counseling program together. And of course, getting CAPE accreditation is not an easy road to go. We pulled all of that together. My primary job within that was, and I was doing this as an assistant professor, so I can't claim that I built this program. My part of this program was putting together the, what do we call it? The revenue expense model. I had to make the numbers work. And I made a case that the numbers could work with the following projections. We had to look at what enrollment might look like. We had to look at what the needs were in the area. We looked at what we had the capacity to do here. We had to look at then what K-Prep required. And I think the requirement was you had to have 3 minimum full-time faculty affiliated with the program. And there were other resources that you had to commit. So within all of that, could we make the numbers work? And I made the case that, yeah, we could make the numbers work based on that. And now the program is up and running. And they did something interesting. I projected that based entirely on in-state tuition, we would need enrollment at this level. With out-of-state tuition, we could tweak it a little bit in this particular way. And they decided instead to just go with a flat tuition rate across the board. And so the program is still up and running. They're now up to 5 faculty they agreed to start with. And I claim 0 credit for any of this, but I got the numbers to work, and so I'm proud of that. But really, it's what I have found in putting programs together is that for really any of the helping professions, whether it's education, counseling, oftentimes the capacity already exists and the courses are already being offered. We just need to organize them in a way that makes sense for a new program or a new major or a new degree. And there are, of course, the hoops you have to jump through institutionally to get the approvals and all that put together. But as long as we are keeping our accreditors happy, then we're able to offer what we need to offer. And it's not, the one thing that surprised me in putting all these programs together is I went into each of them thinking this is going to be a real challenge, got a lot of work ahead of me. It wasn't quite as onerous as I thought. Once I got my hands around what exactly the programs require, that's when I discovered we already do most of this with what we have. And it's maybe making a tweak here and there. So that's the nuts and bolts of it. Making the case that we need this in the first place goes back to then how is this going to draw enrollment? Is this going to be a net positive for the institution? Universities can no longer afford to offer a degree because it's in the common interest of the public good. We have to make a financial case that says this is going to be self-sustaining in the long term. And so making the numbers work is a huge thing. Because of the early experience I had with that, that's usually the first thing I look at is, will this be self-sustaining in 3, 5, 10 years? Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Anyone else in the room? I'd like to check the chat. I'm going to throw this at you with the caveat that I am aware that all institutions are grappling with this issue right now, and Nichols is included, and that is, how do we make our courses compatible with the new ABA requirements, where they all have to be compatible, or is it compatible? Am I using the right term? Yes. Comply. Comply with the ADA requirements. So every course, every document has to be comply with the requirements for visually impaired, auditorily impaired.
question is coming on the heels of the State Department's announcement that they're switching back to times new enrollment away from Calibri. And they switched to Calibri because it was easier for people with certain visual impairments. And now they're shifting back to times new enrollment. So, yeah. Gosh, that is a very broad question. And much of it, I think, depends on what specific courses we're looking at. But really, what it comes down to is, if we have to do it, we do it. And it's as simple as that. And making the changes happen, whether it's, I'm racking my brain for examples of things that have happened in the past. This is me again as a history guy. What has happened before? What has worked before? And the tweaks are relatively minor, but at the same time, you have to make sure that you use them. And I have to admit, I haven't had a whole lot of experience working with ADA compliance specifically, which is kind of ironic for a special ed teacher. The rules that govern federal special ed are under a different umbrella. But I think of what are the faculty going to need to make this happen? What is the rationale behind this push in the first place? And how do we put those two things together in a way that both keeps the burden on faculty to a minimum, but also make sure that we address our students? Any law that comes down like this is ideally in the best interest of the students. And so are we keeping that in mind? Or are we doing it for them? And what do they think about this? But yeah, and I have done a little bit of reading on this, but I have to admit I'm not familiar with the specifics of new regs that are coming down. So I wish I could give you a more specific answer on that.
You're not alone.
Okay. But
Yeah, I
this is
think
what-
everybody it's kind of coming at us fast and furious,
Yeah.
and there's not a lot out there, so I'm just curious if you had any words of wisdom for us.
I wish I did. I wish I had specifics to offer, but this goes back to my saying, if I don't know, I'll just tell you, I don't know. And so I need to do a lot more reading on this and to give whatever guidance that I can. But I will just say, coming at it from a special ed point of view, it's seldom as onerous as you think it's going to be. It's going to be a pain at first, but you adapt. I am old enough to remember when college syllabi were a page and a half long. And now, what's the average syllabus length, would you say, here at Nichols? 7, 8, 9 pages? That's what I'm used to. Yeah. And 90% of it is just stuff we have to put in there. And really, all the students want to know is, what do I have to turn in? When is it due? But yeah, I remember those days fondly. I had professors who would take syllabi and just cross out the old dates and write it in the voice by hand. Anyway, I'm not going to go down memory lane. Things have changed, and so just keeping up with those changes is part of the work.
I'm going to shift gears a little bit. So in our department, we are the Department of Education and Behavioral Sciences. I am a member of that side of the department, Department of Psychology. It's kind of been a long-standing at Nichols. I've only been here for a semester. However, I'm a graduate of Nichols in the school counseling program. I've been a school counselor for about 11 to 12 years prior to coming here. There's always been kind of a little shift in, a little division, I would say shift in our department. And I think currently we have made strides on everybody kind of coming together. Being a counselor and having empathy and, you know, like the collaboration of the two departments, how can you share with us that you can promote that as well, or continue to promote that? Because that's what we're working towards.
Okay. Well, can I ask, forgive me for being a broken record about the history, but has there been like a siloing typically of those two fields? Or?
But there is
Yeah. Breaking around little departments.
A little bit of a.
They build in a different world.
right.
Okay.
So how can you kind of continue to help us merge that and be more collaborative, the two together?
Okay. Well, there's always the professional and there's always the personal. The sense that I get just walking around campus is personally everyone works together fairly well. You like each other well enough. On the professional side, I want to know what are the common elements. You know, what is it that is common to both fields? And there's always something that one side can teach the other. There's always something that students in one program can take from the other that they can incorporate into their own work. And so I'll give you this is going to sound completely off the wall. I promise it's relevant. When I was at Truman, we had a couple of grants well, they weren't grants, they were gifts from corporations. And there was this one that Boeing had given us, but it had been sitting there untouched for like 15 years because it was, and I'll never forget this, for the promotion of ethnic dance. But it was given to the education program. Do dance education, we have music, we didn't do dance education at all. And so, of course, we have money just sitting there, and it's hard to raise money when you're showing that you're not spending it because, what the heck are you doing with it? Well, I had this idea, and I left before we could put it into play, but I had this idea of bringing in a couple of professional dancers for a professional development session for ways to teach students nonverbal means of communication and of classroom management. What can you do to step into a room as a school teacher and just own it from the moment you step in there? And dancers, you gotta step on stage, and that is your stage the minute you get on there. So there's a lot of transferable skill that you can take from that into teaching. Not to say that there's a performative aspect to teaching. I don't like to look at teaching as a performance necessarily, but there's always something that you can put together. There's a lot of similarity that exists between behavioral science, between psychology, and education. There's an awful lot, I think, that we can do to work with each other. And I'm not the sort of person who's going to require people to work together. That's not my style. I'm also not the sort of person who's going to require people to show up to social events just to get to know each other. That is, again, also not my style. But I would encourage as much as I can, what can you do to get things going in a classroom for school teachers? What can you do to get things going for a classroom full of counselors that you can use to sort of cross-pollinate? What can you do together? And that would be the beginning of it. And I would just deliberately, slowly, carefully encourage that and get that going as much as I could, because there is always something to learn. And I think of my own work as an administrator. When you're coming into an administrative profession, an administrative position as a faculty member, you have a particular sense of the work, and then you actually start doing it. I was like, oh, there's other stuff too. And so I found that when I talk to people who are in very different professions, but also in administrative capacities, there's stuff that I can learn. I learned from friends who are in the corporate world, who are in healthcare, things that I can apply to the teaching, just how to interact with people, be willing to listen to them, and the ways that we can work together. So all of which is to say, there's a rich, rich vein that we can tap into with something like this. And I would never force anybody, but I would encourage. And I'd say be as wildly creative as you want to be. And even if it's the most off-the-wall thing, that's sometimes the stuff that works. So be willing to be a little different and try stuff. It's also the stuff that students remember, too, in the end. And so that's really, to me, the end of it is what do the students carry away from the experience. I hope I answered that. Never thought I'd bring up a dance thing. Man, I think that takes me back a ways. But there's always something you can learn.
All right, I don't see any questions. Anyone else? All right, then I'm going to throw this one at you. Not as much as an off-the-wall as the ABA thing. I was just curious where we were all struggling with that. But this one's also kind of interesting. Is what are your thoughts on AI, artificial intelligence, and how does that fit in the psychology counseling profession as well as education?
To me, those are somewhat separate questions. For education, both of these, we talk about artificial intelligence as if it's its own sentient thing, like Data or Star Trek. You know, and it's not that. It's a large language model. And my younger daughter, who God help me, turned 13 yesterday, she was telling me that if you go looking up, if you ask AI to create a picture of a glass full of wine, it will never create a completely full glass. Because every picture that it's going to find is mostly full. And it's incapable of going beyond those bounds. And so as long as we're aware that AI does have some very clear limits, that can be the beginning of understanding what works and what doesn't. And so in education, something that I've seen Just in talking to some of my colleagues who are school teachers, one of them has taken to saying to our students, I'm going to order you to use AI on this particular project. Once it's together, your job is to take it and prove it wrong, and look at all the things that it's gotten wrong. What are the things that it needs to improve? Is it just making stuff up? And how do you know? And like any other technology, you have to test the limits of it. You have to get a sense of what it can and cannot do. And the best analogy that comes to mind, I was thinking about this the other day, but it is driver's ed. You go back 100 years, it didn't exist. 200 years, we all had to learn how to ride horses. Horsemanship is not a skill that everyone needs to know anymore, but most people need to know how to drive a car. This is going to be one of those things where even if you're not going to use it every day, you have to have a sense of how it works. And so encouraging teachers to have their students push the limits on what works and what doesn't within, and this is critical, within carefully supervised limits is, I think, going to be very important in education. And starting now, I'm certain all of your students have used AI to some capacity in their assignments already. And I'm dying to know if you've gotten some interesting stories about what you've seen in their assignments. If we have time, I'd love to hear some of those. But there's a lot happening in that space, and I think we're at a point right now where we can still play with it and see what the limits are. My father, of all people, he's retired. He's a psychologist, and I guess this is what retired psychologists do in their free time. He's gotten a couple of AIs just talking to each other. He loves starting arguments between two different AI models to see what the limits are on that. Play with it and see what happens. As a school teacher, I'm a big fan of play because it's where a lot of learning happens. Play with it and see where it takes you, but in a supervised sort of way. Now, on counseling, behavioral sciences, and psychology, I have read too many stories of teenagers in particular having AI counselors and AI friends who are doing things that no professional in a million years would recommend as a responsible practice. So I think the greater challenge for AI is going to be on the counseling and psychology end. Because in education, you can play with it. In counseling, you don't have the luxury of play. You might have someone in crisis who needs immediate help. They might be turning to ChatGPT, or they might be turning to Copilot, or whatever other systems are out there. Not to say, give me the number for a local counselor. They might say, this is my problem. What do I do? And the same AI that can't give you a full glass of wine is suddenly going to be telling you what you need to do to solve a crisis in your personal life. So from the perspective of someone who's looking at this as an educational process of teaching counselors how to be counselors, they need to find out what the limits are. And they need to be able to then ask their patients and ask their clients, have you worked with AI? Have you put any questions to an artificial intelligence system? What has it told you? What is it recommending that you do? And let's have that conversation. I read, I want to say it was The Guardian. It was one of the major global newspapers. Had a very long piece, and mind you, again, a newspaper, not a scholarly source, so just take that for what it's worth. But the reporter was interviewing people who had AI relationships, like boyfriends and girlfriends who were AI. And there was this one AI model that resets its personality every week. And so this one woman was talking about this AI boyfriend who seemed to be perfectly romantic, but after a week she had to start over again with the new one, and it was driving her kind of a little crazy. And I'm reading this and I'm thinking, what does it say that it's easier to do that than to meet someone in flesh? Okay? So the greater challenge to me is working with artificial intelligence in the counseling space because the responsibilities are, I think, more immediate, and I think the stakes are a little bit higher. But it's such a new thing right now. I cannot offer any prescription for making any immediate changes. I'd be very uncomfortable if you were to ask me what specifically should I do. My only response to that would be play with it and be mindful of its limits. And I think the more we talk about what its limits are, and the concrete ones, and really the silly, funny ones, like the wine glass, those are the ones that are going to stick in people's memories about what the limits are, and to keep in mind what it can and cannot do. Because these AI models, they tap into almost a physiological circuit where you put out something and you get a response back. You put out another stimulus, you get a response back. And it taps into that. And you start thinking, right, a real person is someone I'm talking to. It's not. And so you can tell I have opinions on this, and I can ramble on about this for a long time. I don't want to be like that Simpsons meme, old man yells at a cloud. I don't want to be that. I don't want to be a Luddite. I don't want to say we shouldn't do this at all. What I want to say is we need to find a way to use it in an effective manner that teaches our students both what they need to learn, but also what the limits of that specific technology is. I've talked about for myself, I'm going to admit when I don't know something. AI does not do that because it's programmed to give an answer and to please the person asking the question. We need an AI system that says, I don't know. And so until we get that, we need to be able to teach our students that it's not going to tell you that it doesn't know. It's going to give you an answer. You might really like it, and it might be completely wrong. But if we can start with that and give students the chance to use it in a deliberate and supervised and organized way, bearing in mind that the people they're going to be working with are going to be using it beyond that, and who aren't necessarily aware of its limits, because those are the people they're going to be working with in the future. And I think that's the beginning of that conversation. Won't be the end, but it's a place to start.
Okay, we're getting to the end of our public interview. I want to thank the folks, and I did check the questions on the chat. Thank the folks that are here virtually and those that are here in person. And in closing, I would like to give you a minute to make your closing argument as to sell us on why you want to come to Nichols and why you want to be our Dean of Education and Behavioral Science.
I need to sit down, please. I'm laughing. The Zoom interview that I did the first round, Marilyn said, so this is a chance for you to have a closing statement. I said, I didn't prepare a closing statement. I had questions for you. And it's happening again. You need to prepare a closing statement. The long and short of it is for me, I mentioned at the beginning that I have both professional and personal reasons for wanting to be here and that I hate moving. And once I'm in a place, I am a bloom where you are planted type of person. So this is not an attempt on my part to leverage one offer against another or whatever other game some job applicants play when they're looking for a position. I don't apply to any place that I'm not serious about. And so I've been in regional publics from the beginning. I love the work that we do. I love being able to work with faculty who are devoted to their students, who are committed to the institution that they're in, and to be part of something that is going places. And the vibe that I get, both from what I saw online and now that I'm just walking around campus, the sense that I get is that Nichols is going places, and I'd love to be part of that. So I've got my fingers crossed, maybe this will work out, but in the event that I don't get this position, you pick someone else, I hope it's the best person that you have, and that they're a fantastic match for you, and I appreciate the time that you've put into being part of this process, and being here, whether you're virtual or whether you're here in person with me now. Thank you all very much, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Dr. Jones.
Thank you.
How do you think?